Curtis with Wander with the Workmans, and you're probably wondering where we've been. Well, here's the explanation. So to start things off, let's talk about something that is very, very real in the RV world, and that is fate. Call it karma, call it fate, call it Murphy's Law, call it the universe getting back at you for something you did in a previous life, whatever. It's a real thing. And when you tempt it, things can go really, really bad. And that's exactly what we did. Now, in order to tell this story properly, we need to rewind all the way back to the first few weeks when Havla and I were on the road. We learned a very important lesson. When we took off, we had had some problems with some parts and making repairs on our trailer, and it delayed us from our original timeline. Originally, we had wanted to go to Houston, Texas for a conference that Havla was planning on attending, and then making our way back to Wellington. Well, because of the repairs, we got started later than we thought we were going to, and we really, really pushed, and we were trying to make it from southeast Idaho to Houston, Texas in, I think, just a little over 3 weeks. And we pushed and we pushed and we pushed. And those first couple of weeks on the road were just absolutely miserable. And we finally had to get to a point where Havla realized we weren't going to make it to this conference and that we needed to slow down for our own health and safety. And so that set in our minds kind of what we would consider to be our hard and fast rule of not moving too quickly. And then what did we do? We broke that rule. Yes, we did. So this starts back in early March, and it starts with an 89-year-old woman. You see, Havla's grandmother was, or is this year, has turned 89 years old. And there wasn't a whole lot of conversation in the lead up to her birthday at the end of March as to whether or not there was going to be a big deal made out of this birthday. There was kind of some inclinations that next year, 2020, will be 90, and that's a landmark year, that kind of thing. And so we really hadn't positioned ourselves to be near Idaho at the end of March, thinking, no, not going to be that big of a deal, but next year we need to keep it in mind. And then Facebook starts to light up, text messages start flying around, that kind of thing, and there is going to be a deal made out of this birthday for Havla's grandmother. But we looked at the calendar and we went, well, it's the start of March. We can, if we push it just a little bit, just a little bit, maybe, 100 miles more per move, we could probably make it back to Idaho in time for this birthday party and still be able to accomplish a couple of things. We wanted to stop in Grand Junction and see friends there in Grand Junction, Colorado, and we also wanted to stop in Farmington, New Mexico and get a little work done on our trailer. And because we know a really good repair guy in Farmington, New Mexico. And so we left Tucson and we pushed and we pushed and we pushed and we pushed, and we were so set on making this happen that we started looking at the map and went, man, if we take this route over here, basically the map said you could go this way and make a 90-degree turn and go this way, or you could go this far and take a 45-degree cutoff, and that would save about an hour and a half, 2 hours, if you could drive it at normal speeds. So we thought, okay, let's take this cutoff. And turns out the road was absolutely miserable. The trick to driving that road effectively is actually to avoid the paved spots. It's that bad. And so we took quite a beating, but we made it to Farmington, New Mexico, backed the trailer into our campsite, and you've seen our review, or if you haven't, check it out, our review of Angel Peak Scenic Area near Farmington, New Mexico. So we pull into our campsite there, and one of the things we use to stabilize the trailer and lock things down are X chocks, which fit in an X pattern between the tires. And that's generally Havla's job when she's setting up, is she takes care of putting those in, and she does a couple laps around the trailer, and then she says, something's not right. And so I go to look, and sure enough, there's only about ½ an inch to an inch gap between the front and back tires on the trailer. This is when that's kind of like heavy sense of foreboding starts to settle on my shoulders as I get down on my back and I crawl underneath the trailer, and sure enough, there are the tail ends of 2 of our leaf springs broken free and just dangling, and the whole back axle has shifted forward into the front axle, and there's some rub spots on our wheel wells, and I let go with the classic Workman stream of profanities, because that's what you do in a situation like that, right? Is you cuss a lot, loudly. Anyway, okay. It's 24 bolts. It's not very nice that we have to spend this money. We're not going to get the work done on our trailer that we had planned, because that was just auxiliary work that would make things nicer, but it wasn't necessary. But now we have to go do this kind of things. Now, again, let me back up for just a second here. While we were in Tucson a couple of weeks earlier, our truck had started throwing out a couple of codes and flashing a couple of dash lights at me. I pulled out my reader, read the codes, went and got the parts to fix it. And I didn't do much of a video on it because it was all terribly specific to a 1993 Ford, and I don't know how many of you are out there in a 1993 3/4 ton long box extended cab automatic tread blah 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 Ford. But I made the repairs. Turns the lights off. Truck's functioning perfectly. One of the downsides to Angel Peak Recreation Area, or Scenic Area, is that it's about a 45-minute drive from the nearest town, Farmington, New Mexico. And I was so frustrated with this problem that I knew I had to go get springs, and I had to go get bolts, and I needed new U-bolts. And so I made this list of parts to get, and then I got there to the RV store in town, which Al's RV in Farmington, New Mexico is a great place to go. And then I started having second thoughts, and I'm like, well, if I'm going to go this deep into this suspension thing, I might as well replace everything, and the old springs on the front will ride different than the new springs on the... I should just do the whole thing. So on the fly, I tempted fate once again by changing my plan and attempting to buy enough parts to do all 4 leaf springs and new equalizers. Rather than just replacing the 2 broken leaf springs and attaching it to the old hardware. This leads me down the road of making several trips to Farmington, mostly because I'd forgotten that bolt or this bolt, and you know, and I needed this one other thing, and I needed a different tool. And so I ended up making multiple trips to Farmington, and that's 45 minutes one direction and 45 minutes back, only to find out when I get halfway into something that I'm missing something. In fact, at one point in time, fate was really out to get me, if you want to call it that, because I had bought a package of U-bolts to reattach the axles, and if you know, there's 2 U-bolts, which means there's 4 nuts. You need 4 nuts to install that. Yeah, the package I bought had 3 nuts, and I discover this at like 4:30 in the afternoon. It's a 45-minute drive back to town, and the RV store closes at 5 o'clock. So it ended up taking me between parts runs and what else happened, which I'll get to in a second, and you'll see why it extended this out. But 24 bolts, it ended up taking me nearly 12 days to completely install the new suspension. Here's the problem. Get the suspension completely installed. It turns out, and if you watch our first trip video, I'll link that in the description below, you know that we have a special snowflake of a trailer when it comes to its axles. Well, that snowflake propensity extends to the leaf spring. So I get everything installed, and it just doesn't look right. And it doesn't look like it's going to flex right and move right. And I start looking at it, and I had gotten the wrong leaf springs. The standard leaf spring for a trailer our size is about 25¼ inches from bolt hole to bolt hole. Well, the old springs that I had taken off of and taken my measurements from they're 21 years old now, and they were so stretched out that they were showing about 25¼ inches. Yeah, no. Fresh springs from mounting point to mounting point on the trailer itself are 23 and a half or 23 1/4. And those are incredibly special. So after putting the whole thing together, I find out I gotta go find these specialty springs. We ended up having to have them manufactured. These springs are a one-off deal. We had to have them built from scratch at a suspension and alignment store in Farmington. So if you do need specialty leaf springs, check out Jeans. That's a good place to go, is Jeans. That isn't the only thing that extended our stay and our gap on these videos. So as I'm making all of these trips back and forth to Farmington, New Mexico, the truck starts acting funny again, like it had before I repaired it in Tucson. And lights are flashing and it's throwing up old codes and stuff like that. I can't get it figured out. Start looking on online forums and they're like, you might want to get this thing checked. I called our mechanic back in Idaho and he says if the transmission fluid isn't dark red and if it smells burnt, you need to get it into a transmission place. Well, sure enough, I pull out the dipstick. Smells burnt. It's a light pink color, not that deep red that you normally associate with the transmission fluid. Take it in. There's no rebuild kit. It's hashed. We need a whole new transmission. So on top of trying to make these trailer repairs, get the new springs built, everything like that, we have to take the truck in and get a completely different transmission installed. Now, some things that did work in our favor. First of all, Farmington, because of the oil industry, is pretty unique in that there's not a lot of places that have a place that specialty manufactures springs and has an RV store that does carry all of these various size bolts and nuts and that kind of thing. So it was, despite the drive, it was a one-stop shop. So we were very lucky there as well. The other thing that we got incredibly lucky with is that we actually have family here in Farmington. And not only do we have Farmington, but it's Havla's aunt and uncle, and I just married in. But luckily they claim me, so that's a plus as well. But they just happen to keep an extra vehicle around there for their kids and people they know that occasionally you break down and that kind of thing. And so luckily for us, not only did we have family in town to support us and help us, but they supported us with having a vehicle for us to drive, because if it's a 45-minute drive, that's a heck of a walk. And so long story short, we have a brand new transmission. We have a brand new suspension under the trailer, and we got to spend an extended amount of time with our family. But that all culminated into about a 3.5, I think, week gap. If you look at our previous video of being in Tucson and our Angel Peak Scenic Area Campground review, you'll notice, if you look at the dates, that there is a huge gap there. And ultimately the point is that there are times when your attention gets diverted. I guess the first point is don't tempt fate. Driving that hard, that long over and picking questionable roads was really what did it. Ultimately, I think I stuck the back tire in a pothole. So don't tempt fate. If you have a hard set, fast rule that you have set for yourself because that is how you are comfortable traveling, don't break it. Don't break that rule. You have come to that conclusion for a very specific reason, and that's because it works for you and your travel style. And so don't press it, even if it's tempting. It really isn't worth it. In our case, this was about a $6,000 whoopsie. The other point that it really brought home for me was you have to be able and you have to be willing to split focus or change focus. And so I'm sorry to you guys who watch our videos regularly that we took such a huge gap between two videos, but this was something that needed our attention, and it needed my full attention to make sure that it got repaired correctly and that I was working with the shop as much as I possibly could and that kind of thing. And so here it is, my formal apology. I'm sorry that I went so long without videos, but I hope you learned a couple of things and at least get a chuckle out of our foibles, because really, maybe it would have happened. It was an older suspension. It is an older transmission. Something was going to happen, but we really accelerated that process by breaking our one hard, fast rule of don't travel too quickly. You guys, hey, if you have any stories about your hard and fast rules specifically and how you got them, what is it that you stick to religiously as you travel, leave those down in the comments below. I'd love to hear about them. Maybe give me something to consider as we learn more about going down the road. Also, if you like what we're doing and you haven't done all those YouTube-y things like share, subscribe, hit the bell icon for notifications. If you do that, I'd really appreciate it. Also, if you want to keep up with us on a more spontaneous basis, we've got a couple of ways now. First of all, we are on Instagram. We are Wander with the Workmans on Instagram, and we are on Facebook now as well. You can catch us at facebook.com/Wander with the Workmans. Those links also will be in the description below, but if you want to follow us along, those are great places to keep in touch with us. In the meantime, you guys, we'll catch you down the road.